I don't want to throw red meat out to people. I want to be able to have both sides of the fence take a look at the story and make their own supposition. And it does expose what happened in the Ukraine, what happened with China. It does expose the deals that Hunter Biden made.
My guest today is Robert Davi, director of the new film My Son Hunter, a biopic about Hunter Biden. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, this is such an interesting movie, and
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating because conservatives are a little bit maligned in the film industry. So on this film's website, you market it as a movie that exposes the Biden family's corruption. What are some of the scandals with the Biden family that you tackle in this film?
Well, first off, as a filmmaker, it's not. Did you ever see the movie American Hustle?
Yeah.
Well, I fashion it after that. It's a
Okay.
true story, and you dramatize it, satirize it in some way. It's not about bashing any one particular family. It's about telling a story, a father and son story, one son who has an addiction problem. I don't want to demonize the addiction aspect of what he is. I have a son who had a bad addiction problem. I understand the pain a family goes through with that. And so I don't want to demonize that. I want to expose it. I show it. Much like Hunter talks about it in his autobiography, Beautiful Things. So it's not like that. I don't want to throw red meat out to people. I want to be able to have both sides of the fence take a look at the story and make their own supposition. And it does expose what happened in the Ukraine, what happened with China. It does expose the deals that Hunter Biden made. Now, was it because of the influence of having a father who was vice president and then presidential candidate and whatnot? That's another thing. But we do expose the deal making with the people involved in China and in the Ukraine, and it's quite. And you have to say this, okay? I have to say, if it was the Trump family, every media outlet in the world would be right now, especially what's happening in the Ukraine, would be pointing fingers and talking about a whole bunch of suppositions. So we have to be fair, and we have to, as conservative filmmakers or people that have a different ideology, be able to tell stories that, some people, just like they do with everyone else, tell stories that you have to say, hey, take a look at this. You know what I mean? And we've got to have Andrew Breitbart, 10th anniversary of his death, was one of the people that said culture. You have to, and that was something, he was a good friend of mine, and we talked about culture a lot and how you have to capture that and understand it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned Breitbart because I am a firm believer that culture is the driving force in politics. Politics is downstream of culture, as he famously said.
Yes.
How does this movie maybe play into that message?
Well, because you're going to be able to, people that don't, I've shown a rough cut to people that do not know what was on that laptop or have heard bits and pieces from the news, but now when you see it in a film, when something is dramatized, and I've got great actors. Lawrence Fox is one of the great English actors. His family has a huge dynasty of English acting. Ed Fox is the uncle, James Fox, who worked with David Lean, some of the biggest, greatest directors. Lawrence does a marvelous job as Hunter, very sympathetic, and and shows the insanity that went through and the brilliance of his being able to make these deals while still using drugs. Then you have John James playing Joe Biden, who's very sympathetic. It's a father and son story. It's painful because all fathers and sons, if you have, it's complex. And Gina Carano plays a Secret Service agent, and I have this young actress, Emma, from Serbia. I keep forgetting her last name, but she's a terrific young actor, like a Michelle. It's like a new discovery of a Michelle Pfeiffer,
Oh, wow.
Sharon Stone, someone like that. She's 20, in her mid-20s, and it's all told through the eyes of this left-wing activist who is working as a dancer in a private social club to pay for her college education, and she gets involved with Hunter, and now you see the story unfold. But it's very important that we capture culture. I spoke at Family Values several years ago, and I said the most important thing is culture. This is, how many people, I said, want to be lawyers here? And right, how many want to be businessmen? They raised their hands. How many want to be filmmakers? And it was like, I said, this is the area you've got to start to understand. Because Hollywood has absolutely, they control the narrative. They do control the narrative.
Right.
And we could say that they don't, but they do it through the youth, through education, And when those young children that look up to whatever movie star or music star or whatever it might be get a reinforcement, even though their educators are teaching CRC or the CRT, teaching CRT, or totally giving them this Marxist ideology, this infiltration of Marxist ideology that they've infected our schools with.
Right.
And they've been doing it since the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something new. You as
Sure.
the Heritage Foundation would know this.
Yeah.
And we have to start acting proactively, getting into the arts in a very, not a stodgy way, not a, but in a hip, cultural way. Don't you agree?
And I think it's interesting because you've used this word sympathetic as portraying President Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden. And I think that's an interesting angle because some people might argue that talking about politicians' children is off limits. I remember during the Trump administration, Barron Trump was, when people would talk about him, there was this response.
Yeah.
But Ivanka and Jared were okay. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's also, that started before Trump in terms of children should be off limits. And it's also partly a manipulation on people because sometimes the children they do reflect on the adult, on the parents. And I think it's one of the reasons why Hunter wrote Beautiful Things, to expose everything out there, because it would be his dad would be attacked on that level, perhaps. But the question for me is not necessarily if children should be explored, because we should know about their children. It's how we understand who they are. And I say sympathetic in terms of a father and son. People can. You look at a situation or a family situation and you make a judgment. And that's what I've done here. I've tried to tell the cast, I want this to be believable, I want it to be sympathetic, but I want it to have an edge of a satirical edge at different times. And that's what they would have done with the Trumps. Whenever Trump is portrayed, you know how, even on Saturday Night Live, I did not want this to be something like that. I wanted real human beings with a dilemma, with the idea of making deals, and pinpoint that aspect. It's also very sexual. It has a very sensual aspect to it in certain ways because, as Hunter talks about in his autobiography, I wanted to show that part of his life. The strip club, the Chateau Marmont, the going to different. He got kicked out of the Chateau Marmont and then went to another bed and breakfast, and then goes off to the Ukraine and makes these billion-dollar deals, and then the Chinese, and then with the Chinese. So to juxtapose that is a very interesting story, and especially today, as we see what's happening in the Ukraine. And you know what's interesting to me? I find it that not enough politicians, and you have a strong voice. The Heritage has a strong voice. Let's think of what happened here. The machine of America was working under Trump. We were. And we know that in World War II you had Germany and Japan. Now we have Russia and China. And now Iran is going to come into play, and you're going to have North Korea into play. Why aren't we ramping up manufacturing in America? The Green New Deal and the left, the progressive left in America, is working against what America should be. They're working, I believe, against American interests. We should be ramping up, like they did in World War II, our manufacturing, our medicines. Keystone should be opened up. We have enough technology to do new green, to use energy cleanly. Do we not? I would think we do. So why don't they do this? Why don't we have energy that's, and Biden gets in, and the blunder of shutting down Keystone. Europe gets 46%, 50% of its gas and oil from Russia. That could be America.
Right.
Now gas is $6 a gallon in Los Angeles, which I just left.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Gas is going to go over oil, $110 a barrel maybe. So why don't we get those reserves? Why aren't we the number one energy while we're making this transition? Because I'm all for the environment.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, and I wish we could delve into that a little more, but unfortunately we will have to wrap it there. That was Robert Davi, director of the new film My Son Hunter, a biopic about Hunter Biden. Robert, thank you so much for your time.